Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Great show because guess what, Landis? Spring football is right around the corner. This is the first of what I think will be like 3 spring football preview shows that we do here on Kings of the North. We will hit all of our 26 teams. I think we'll do 13 in one show and 13 in another to really preview, give you a little taste of what everybody's has coming in March. Stuff's percolating. BYU opens spring practice on Thursday. Boston College starts on Friday. A bunch of other teams start next week. So this show is 10 Northern players that we are especially curious about this spring. You pick 5. I pick 5. Transfers, a couple of them. Some guys stepping into roles where like a major dude graduated or moved on and they've got to fill that role. Some high recruits in there. Just as a tease, I'll tell you, we have receivers from Washington, Ohio State, and Utah that we're going to talk about. We have a cornerback from Penn State. We have defensive ends from Northwestern, Syracuse, and Iowa. We have a running back from Notre Dame. We have an offensive tackle from Colorado. But we're going to start with the Michigan quarterback, which is the best place we could start. It's the national champs and the most important position, and it's the guy that you wanted to talk about, Alex Orji. Brother, this is huge. This guy's a fascinating player. He's thrown one career pass, and he's stepping in for the 15-0 national champs that have lost so much, including quarterback J.J. McCarthy. Why are you so eager to see what he's going to look like this spring?
Like we think he's stepping in, right? We're sure.
I mean, it's nobody else on the current roster, right? Unless it's true freshman Jaden Davis, which you tilted your head.
Jack Tuttle got his 7th year of eligibility.
Look at you tuttling. I didn't know you were going to come out and tuttle on us right away.
I don't want to tuttle. I want to see Alex. I want to see Alex Orji play, but Jack Tuttle is the only guy in the room with any kind of extensive experience.
You're coming out. You're dropping a Tuttle.
I'm just saying.
It's the new end zone celebration that everybody's doing. Drop a little Tuttle on you.
Drop a little Tuttle on the people.
Give everybody, for people who don't know the Tuttle story, give them the mini Tuttle story.
Yeah. So Jack Tuttle from the San Diego area, signed with Utah, went there for 1 year, redshirted. Was high school teammates of Chris Olave. I think I tend to gloss over that part because we've talked about it a million times covering Ohio State. But for anybody who doesn't know, he was high school teammates with Chris Olave. And the way that Ohio State discovered Chris Olave is that Ryan Day was going out to, I can't remember the name of the high school, to watch Jack Tuttle throw. And then he saw this receiver and said, "Oh, who's that?" And then that kid became Chris Olave. Jack Tuttle signed with Utah, went there for a year, redshirted, didn't play a snap. Transferred to Indiana, which is like kind of strange. Was there for 4 years. Started a handful of games. I think he has 5 starts at Indiana. He's there from 2019 through 2022, and then transfers to Michigan as like a veteran backup presence, good kind of guy to have in the room behind J.J. McCarthy. Plays some last year's as the backup, and then he petitioned to get a 7th year this offseason, and he got it. And I don't think Jack Tuttle did that just because like he's cool being a backup. I think he did it because he thinks he might have a shot to win the starting job at Michigan. At the very least, he's in the competition. There's been nothing out of Ann Arbor, at least to my knowledge, that says like Alex Orji is definitely the guy. He's probably the favorite based off of like his usage and some high leverage moments last year. But he only has 1 pass, as you said, and Jack Tuttle at the very least has started some games. He's thrown four more passes than Alex Orji has in games. So I think it makes the competition interesting. I'm not sitting here trying to tell you like watch out for Jack Tuttle. He's definitely going to win this job, but it's a non-zero chance, I think, that Jack Tuttle wins the job in Ann Arbor. Do you disagree with that?
I kind of forgot he was still there. So yeah. No, I guess when you have a guy, 21 career rushes for 123 yards for Alex Orji, that's what he was last year. He was a wrinkle run it quarterback, 1 career pass. That's what J.J. McCarthy was for a year before he became the starter and took over for Cade McNamara. So this is what Michigan has done. Like they'll put you in as a wrinkle run guy as a way of trying to like develop you long term. So just make sure everybody doesn't, he's just a runner, right? That's not. Justin Fields was just a runner at Georgia for a year. They used him as a wrinkle run guy, right? So like this guy can play quarterback 2 quarterbacks in the fall? 2? Both?
They're very different,
especially with different skill sets. Like, is that impossible?
No, I don't think it's impossible. Well, I guess that would be an interesting decision, I guess, for Sharon Moore to make with an inexperienced offensive coordinator, as we talked about. So that may be a lot to handle for Michigan. But if a 2 quarterback system were ever going to work, I think it would have to be like 2 guys with sort of opposing skill sets that you can kind of complement each other with. And I think Alex Orji and Jack Tuttle would do that. But the thing that just makes it hard is like I don't know what kind of passer Alex Orji is, right? Like like you said, he's thrown 1 pass. It was 2 seasons ago. It was a game against UConn. He's 1 for 1 for 5 yards in his career, and every other time he's played, he's run the ball or handed the ball off. I think he only has maybe even like 2 dropbacks or 2 or 3 dropbacks, and a couple of those turned into scrambles. I think so. He's just not been asked to throw the ball, and I think we talked about this before, right? He would not be the first guy to win a starting job with that kind of inexperience. CJ Stroud sort of famously in Columbus, like never threw a pass before he became Ohio State starting quarterback. I don't think anyone thinks that Alex Orji is that kind of passer, but that goes to show you that at least, it can be done. The thing that I guess you hang your hat on a little bit if you're like a believer in Alex Orji or like want to get excited about his prospects is the fanfare he got, the attention he got, the way that he turned heads during Michigan's bowl prep while imitating Jalen Milroe. And I don't think that was just with his ability to run the ball. I think there was something there with the big arm too that helped Michigan prepare really well for Alabama's starting quarterback. So like I think there's more there than just a running ability. And frankly, the running ability is really, really enticing, right? So I still think that Alex Orji is the guy, but it's time in spring ball now for him to go out there and show that. And I'm interested too to see like Michigan spring practice under Jim Harbaugh was like state secrets, like no one ever saw anything. If Sharon Moore opens it up a little bit, maybe we get to get a better vibe of actually what's going on with Alex Orji and all these quarterbacks during Michigan spring practice.
Jack Tuttle will turn 25 in April.
Yeah.
So not only like different skill sets, but I think technically maybe different generations. I don't know. Is one a millennial and one's Gen Z or something? I mean, he's not Cam Rising at Utah is a 7th year quarterback too. That will be a future episode. That's like a May episode. Best 7th year quarterbacks in the North. Chris Olave has more than 2,000 receiving yards in the NFL. They're high school teammates.
Chris Olave is going into his 3rd year in the NFL, isn't he?
Chris Olave is like getting ready for his 2nd contract in the NFL. And he played 4 years of college. It's not like Chris Olave was in and out. He could be in the sport.
I know. It's crazy.
7 years. Lots of people go to college for 7 years. Yeah, they're called doctors.
They're called doctors. That's right. There are 2 other quarterbacks here. Jaden Denegal, who's in the same recruiting class as Alex Orji, and then Jaden Davis, the highly talented true freshman. I think you have to probably give him some consideration too. It really does feel like it's wide open, but I think, and I use Alex Orji sort of as the stand-in for like the Michigan quarterback competition, but I think of everyone in that group, he's certainly the most interesting.
At some point, we will claim popular culture of the North. Like we'll talk about what TV shows and movies we get Tommy Boy.
Oh yeah, Sandusky. Yeah.
Last 10 national champions. How many had to replace or did replace their starting quarterback the next season? Would you guess? How many of the 10?
6.
7. Michigan's the 7th. So it's a normal thing to do. The 3 that didn't, Ohio State won it in 2014 with a mix of JT Barrett and Cardale Jones, brought them both back in 2015. It didn't really work. Clemson in 2018, Trevor Lawrence wins it as a true freshman. So he comes back as a sophomore, and then Stetson Bennett back to back.
Mm-hmm.
It is an honor to be referenced. So this
did you do that just to do your impersonation? Did you throw that?
No, I reached the point. It's like how can I squeeze Stetson Bennett into this show? Bama, Jake Coker to Jalen Hurts after they won it in 2015 and in 2016. Deshaun Watson into Kelly Bryant for Clemson. Actually, I was trying to look for the comparison. Like, what is the best comparison here?
That's a good one.
I think it might be that when Clemson tried to come back, they were the number 1 seed. Like they made the playoff as the 1 seed with Kelly Bryant, right? So there was a lot of infrastructure there. Now there's a really good defensive team, and like Michigan's undergone a lot more changes. That was Dabo and Brent Venables, and they're still doing their thing. Bama, I mean, they replaced Jalen Hurts in the championship game and then had Tua be the starter the next year. Trevor Lawrence came back. LSU is a good example. 2019 LSU, everybody leaves. Miles Brennan's the starter the next year. He plays okay, gets hurt. They wind up playing 2 true freshmen. It's kind of a weird year. They go 5-5, and it's the beginning of the end for Coach O at LSU. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to shoehorn both my impressions into the first Northern segment. Coach, I'm not going to do it. Bama went from Mac Jones in 2020. Bryce Young is sitting there ready, right? And then last year, Carson Beck takes over for Stetson Bennett the second time around. So, I think Kelly Bryant's maybe the example, but this is also the norm. But maybe, how do you win national championship with great veteran quarterback play? Mm-hmm. So it's like, hey, the national champ lost its quarterback. It's not a coincidence. That's why they won the national championship. They don't exactly have a guy sitting there ready for sure, though, right? Like Mac Jones to Bryce Young, it's like, okay, everybody knows what's happening here, right? So this is, I do think for a national champion, this is still maybe a little more uncertainty than you would expect at the quarterback position, even though maybe they thought that J.J. McCarthy would stick around for year 4, and then he was too good. Now he's going to go be a first-round pick.
I do wonder about that last part, because if there was any, thought that J.J. McCarthy wasn't going to be around for year 4, then it is a bit odd to me that they didn't divvy up whatever backup snaps were available to guys that they thought were going to be here this year, right? They gave him the Jack Tuttle, who at the time they didn't know was going to be here this year. Like it's weird that Alex Orji only has 1 pass attempt. I think Denegal has a couple, 5 in his career. He's 4 or 5 passing in his career for 50 yards and a touchdown. So he's started 4 more times than Alex Orji has. But there was there wasn't a ton of backup quarterback reps to go around last year. But Jack Tuttle threw the ball 17 times, right? Like, I don't know, would have been maybe a little more beneficial for those to go to Alex Orji, so we had some idea of what they were getting into this year.
Building a Tuttle hive. Are you persuading yourself in the midst of this conversation? You're like, 25-year-old quarterback.
No, I've seen Michigan start a version of Jack Tuttle, right? This was the beginning of Jim Harbaugh's tenure. This is his first 4 years were nothing but Jack Tuttle. We know what that looks like. I don't want to see Jack Tuttle.
Jack O'Tuttle.
Yeah.
John O'Corn reference. I don't have a John O'Corn impersonation. I'll work on that. All right. So this is super interesting. Super interesting. Like whatever eyeballs and ear holes we get on Michigan spring football, it's like, who's running with the ones and how do they look when it comes to the quarterback position?
So what did it look like when Alex Orji threw the ball? Because we don't know.
Now, again, that was the same Ohio State going into 2021. CJ Stroud had not thrown a pass in college football. It's like, oh, it's worked out okay. So, okay, really good one to start. I like this one. This is my first one that I want to talk about. It's the team that lost in the national championship game, and it's Denzel Boston, the 6'4", 207-pound receiver from Washington, for a program that lost its top 8 pass catchers from last year. 6 of them are at the NFL Combine this week, and the other 2 are at Alabama with Kalen DeBoer. So this is like wiped out. This is gone. This is a team that threw for more than 5,000 passing yards a year ago, and practically all of it is gone. By my calculations, Washington is losing 92.7% of its receiving yards from a year ago. They have 7.3% of it back. And Denzel Boston is 51 of those yards. So he's not their leading receiver coming back. Giles Jackson is. He had 106 receiving yards. They actually didn't play him in the Apple Cup last year and wanted to maintain his red shirt. So they had plans for him. He's going to be their slot guy. And then they did bring in a transfer from Cal, Jeremiah Hunter, who the past 2 seasons at Cal, in 2022, he had 60 catches for 965 yards. Last year, he had 62 catches for 703 yards. He's a good player. He's probably going to start too, but I think Denzel Boston is their 3rd starting receiver in this group. And I like it. He's the young guy on the way up. He's a big-bodied guy, 6'4", 207. He's from Washington. He was like a big-time local recruit for them. Mm-hmm. And, it's fun to bring in a transfer. Giles Jackson was a transfer too, right? But this is like a developmental guy who I think has a lot of potential. And if you're going to keep being Washington at all, even though Michael Penix is gone, and even though Kalen DeBoer is gone, and even though Ryan Grubb is gone, you need to develop receivers. So I think this is incredibly crucial for, can Jed Fish and this version, Brennan Carroll as the offensive coordinator, can this version of Washington retain this reputation as hey man, you want to throw it throw the ball, you want to catch the ball, go play at Washington. And I think Denzel Boston, as a developmental guy who will be in his third year in the program, like, I think he's incredibly crucial to that. And I'm super excited to see what he looks like.
Yeah, no, so am I. I wouldn't have necessarily faulted a guy like Denzel Boston had he decided, what, the whole coaching staff left.
Yeah.
I don't know what this is going to look like. I'm going to go somewhere else. Now he's from the area, as you said, so maybe that's a different proposition for a local kid. But sticking it out and seeing the opportunity and kind of wanting to attack that and take it for yourself, I think is admirable and really interesting. When Jetfish went there, I think we all were on alert for like some guys from Arizona going there.
Yeah.
They had a pretty deadly passing attack with Noah Fafita and Tetero McMillan and Jacob Cowing. So we know that that's a coaching staff that like wants to throw the ball, seems to develop receivers pretty well, and can get decent quarterback play. So like, I don't know if they're going to have Will Rogers throwing the ball. Like, I think it's out there for Denzel Boston to be a kind of a breakout guy this year, but just based on sheer workload alone, like he's going to get a ton of targets. Yeah. I would think. Cause even like physically, like 6'4", like he is like dramatically physically different from a guy like Giles Jackson. You need that big-bodied outside possession receiver who can go down the field and make plays, which I very much think Washington is still going to want to be about, even with this new coaching staff. Who's a better candidate to kind of be the guy that rises there other than Denzel Boston?
Giles Jackson, 5'9", 178. So again, like a very different kind of guy. Is Roma Dunze, 1,640 yards, combine. Jalen Polk, 1,159 yards, combine. Jalen McMillan got hurt, but 559 yards, combine. Jack Westover, the tight end, 433 yards, combine. Devin Culp, 208 yards, the second tight end, combine. Dylan Johnson, 190 yards receiving out of the backfield, combine. 3 receivers, 2 tight ends, and their running back, all at the NFL combine. And then like Jeremy Bernard, they were like, we're developing you. And then he's like, I'm going to Bama. And then their third string tight end also went to Bama.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my. That's a lot. Like you have turnover, 93% of your receiving yards. That's a lot of receiving yards out there.
That's a lot of receiving yards. Yeah.
So super, super excited to see this young guy. All right. 2 freshmen are next on our list. And I love your choice that we're going to go to next because it's an offensive tackle. And I knew you were going to do this guy.
My initial list had multiple offensive tackles on it, but I dropped some of them and just kept Jordan Seaton, the true freshman from Colorado here, the number 1 tackle in the class of 2024, 5-star guy, obviously. I think he was number 17 overall in the 247 composite, just like a gigantic recruit for Deion Sanders. I think he's the 3rd highest rated player to sign with Colorado since we've been like keeping track of that stuff. So like in the internet recruiting era, and like no one saw it coming. Jordan Seaton had like a top 6 and Colorado wasn't part of it. And then he picked Colorado. And then there was some drama with the signing, but he ultimately signed with Colorado. There was like a flirtation with Maryland there late. He is from Washington, D.C. originally, went to IMG Academy down in Florida. And like we all know the deal with Colorado, right? They need to be much, much better on the offensive line than they were last year, which puts a ton of pressure on Jordan Seaton, I think, to be ready to roll as a true freshman. Frankly, part of it worries me a little bit that like maybe there's too much expectation on him. It's a hard position to play very early on. I think Colorado generally has like improved on the offensive line with some of the transfer portal moves that Deion Sanders has made. I expect them to be better next year, but I also expect them to put this kid in the left tackle spot, like, in the spotlight. Everyone's going to be watching him. And he's going to have to perform at a high level very early in his career with the rest of the line, but him in particular, to help protect Shedeur Sanders and help Colorado take a step forward. So I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say this without looking at every single roster, but like, is there a freshman in the country that's going to have more on him than Jordan Seaton will this year as a starting left tackle of Colorado?
Maybe Dylan Raiola as the quarterback at Nebraska, except probably there's more willingness to accept the bumps and the bruises, that like the mistakes along the way. Yeah. Because Jordan Seaton is like, Shedeur Sanders is an awesome quarterback and they have a huge need that they're trying to fix. The offensive line held them back last year, and now they're one of freshmen to fix it. Nebraska's just like, hey man, we're like building for the future and we're going to happen to play a freshman quarterback. So I think you can make that compelling case. I think Caden Proctor and Caleb Downs are two huge transfers to the north. They were both freshmen at Alabama last year. Caden Proctor was the left tackle. Caleb Downs was the safety. Caleb Downs is now at Ohio State. Caden Proctor is now at Iowa. Neither of them are on our list. But Caden Proctor a year ago as the starting left tackle, as a 5-star recruit at Alabama, was like not great early and I think had some struggles. Both, I think, like, right, just like handling the burden plus like handling pass rushers. And he got better at the end of the year. Because otherwise it's like, man, I was going to, it's like, oh man, I don't even know the last time there was a true freshman that started left tackle. It's like, actually it was Alabama last year, you idiot. So is that a reasonable expectation? Like it might take half a season for him to find his footing?
Yeah, I think so. Caden Proctor is actually one of the guys that I had on my list who I then took off because I figured the conversation would kind of be similar if you had both Jordan Seaton and Caden Proctor. But I think you're absolutely right. But it just goes to show you, like Caden Proctor is one of the best offensive tackle prospects coming out of high school, like in the last 10 years. And like, even he had some struggles early on because it's an incredibly difficult situation to be in, making that jump and trying to play left tackle in major college football. And maybe it'll be different, for Jordan Seaton in the Big 12 compared to Caden Proctor in the SEC. But I don't know if there's good defenses in the Big 12 too. There's Jordan Seaton. One of the reasons he said he wanted to go to Colorado was because Colorado was going to the Big 12 and he thought he would get better matchups playing for Colorado in that conference and was excited about the opportunity to kind of grow from that. So I fully expect him to have some struggles early on. It's the thing that I think worries you about any young player, right? And it maybe happens more often with quarterbacks, or it's most obvious with quarterbacks, but it's like, when you go through that, are you able to get on the other side of it? And sometimes you're not, and it like just lingers with you for your entire career. And I'm not trying to be doom and gloom about a kid before he's played a snap of college football. But, I also saw last year, like Deion Sanders had Cormani McClain, and like that was like kind of a weird situation, like a really highly touted kid, played defensive back, signed as a defensive back at Colorado, like didn't play very much. And like Deion was like pretty out there about like Cormani McClain's got to be better at this, and this before we think about playing him. And, I if that happens with a kid like Jordan Seaton, because there's some struggles, like I just worry about it a little bit. So super talented player, really good pass protector. I think that's the thing that he does best coming out of high school, which is maybe not always the case with young offensive linemen, but huge spot for him because he's going to be asked a lot, or a lot is going to be asked of him. Starting this spring, like, people are going to be watching him every move he makes, and then certainly once the season starts.
The one thing is, as much as they need him, like the standard's not as high, right? So like Caden Proctor stepping in at Alabama's like, hey, by the way, Alabama's trying to win the national title. They have first-round picks at tackle all the time. Last year, according to PFF, the left tackle for Colorado, there were 21 Pac-12 tackles, left or right side, who played at least half the snaps last year. The Colorado left tackle was 15th out of 21. So again, like the bar is low. Jordan Seaton can make some mistakes and still maybe as a true freshman be better than what they had last year because they just could not protect Shedeur Sanders.
Yeah, they were 56 out of 68 power, or 69, I guess, power teams last year in the PFF pass blocking efficiency metric. They were really bad. So it's hard for them to be worse than they were last year.
Okay. 50, say that again, 50 what?
56th out of 69 team, 68 power conference teams at Notre Dame. They were 56th.
Okay. That's not good. All right. We're going to go to another freshman, and that's the number one freshman in the country, and it's Jeremiah Smith. These were the top 5 Northern recruits that are coming in this year. Number 1 is Jeremiah Smith. This is by the 247, 24/7. Let me pause here for a second. Since the site started, I call it 247, and multiple times a month, I have people yelling at me. It's 24/7, I guess, right? That is how they refer to themselves. It makes sense because it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. 247 doesn't mean anything. Those 3 numbers in a row, 2, 4, 7, 8. That's not a thing. Nobody says it. I'm going to start trying to say it, but it is ingrained in me to say it wrong. So I will try.
Everybody says it wrong, which means it's right.
Does everyone say 247 Sports?
I always have. I don't know that I've ever heard anyone say 24/7.
Oh, for real? I thought maybe only you and I were the ones who said it wrong. I'm going to try to say 24/7 Sports. 247sports.com. Their composite rankings. Number 1 is Jeremiah Smith, the Florida receiver at Ohio State. The next best Northern recruit, he actually went to Alabama for a month. I'm counting him as a recruit because he transferred to Ohio State. Is that fair? Julian saying the quarterback, to count him as a recruit to Ohio State?
Yeah, they're all the same high school class. I think that's fair.
Okay. So Julian Sands, number 2. Number 3 is Jordan Seaton. So he's the number 17 overall recruit in the country. He's the 3rd guy at one of our northern schools. We acknowledge this. We're not trying to pretend, right? We acknowledge that southern schools get more of the top recruits, in large part because more of the top recruits are down there, are in the South. So this is just a reminder of that. Jordan Seaton, the 3rd best northern recruit. Number 4 is Dylan Raiola. He's number 21 overall in the composite rankings. We're expecting him to be the starting quarterback at Nebraska. And 5th in the North is Edric Houston, who's a defensive lineman at Ohio State. I don't know what our expectation is, Landis, of how much he may play this year. Probably not much. So I do think of these 5 guys, there are 3 that we expect to play. Raiola, starter at Nebraska. Seaton, starter at Colorado. And the guy I want to talk about right now is Jeremiah Smith. Who do you think he will be a, quote, starting receiver at Ohio State this season?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's Emeka Ibuka is back, and Carnell Tate is kind of like the next guy there in terms of like who played the most snaps last year. So it's like a competition for the 3rd receiver spot at Ohio State, and it's Jeremiah Smith is a true freshman, and then like some guys that have been around, but really not anyone who's played extensively. So I think he will eventually or ultimately come out on top of that competition and be the 3rd starter.
I think he could set Ohio State's freshman receiving record, which I think, and I haven't quadruple checked it, but Chris Carter as a true freshman had 476 receiving yards at Ohio State. This is the true freshman record. Michael Jenkins had more than 800 yards as a redshirt freshman. So again, I just think true freshman's a little bit different. When you think about this era of Ohio State receivers, what they did as true freshmen, Chris Olave, 12 catches for 197 in 2018 as a true freshman, but huge in the Michigan game. Like there was an injury, they needed him, he came on late. So that was like a big thing. Like, hey, this guy as a freshman showed something at the end of the year. And then he became Chris Olave. 2019, Garrett Wilson had 30 catches for 432 as a regular part of a receiver rotation, like a co-starter. Jamison Williams, who eventually transferred to Alabama, went on to be a first-round pick, had 6 catches for 112 yards that year. 2020, Jackson Smith and Jigba had 10 catches for 49 yards, like had a toe tap touchdown in the back of the end zone on garbage time that everybody remembers, but like didn't really do anything. Julian Fleming, who like Jeremiah Smith was the number 1 receiver recruit in the country, true freshman year, 7 catches, 74 yards. 2021, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Ibuka basically didn't do anything into the bowl game when Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson opted out. For the season, Marvin Harrison Jr., 11 catches, 139. Ibuka, 9 catches, 191. And then last year, Carnell Tate, as a true freshman, was a contributor. We were kind of waiting all year for him to maybe even do a little bit more, be given more of a chance. 18 catches for 264. So it is, Ohio State's been running through big-time receiver recruits. It is not the norm for them to have huge roles as true freshmen. I think there are 2 things at play here. One is the sophomore receiver group, and I guess more the junior and sophomore receiver groups. The junior receiver group especially kind of wasn't up to the normal Ohio State standard. So normally you'd have 3rd-year guys ready to roll. That's not really the case. Ibuka did stay, but he's probably more of a slot guy. So there is more opportunity than normal. Certainly more opportunity. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Ibuka were here. They were playing behind Jackson Smith and Jigba, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. It's like, hey, can we get on the field? It's like, no, I don't care who your dad is. I don't care how high your ranking is. Wasn't Ibuka the number 1 receiver in the country too? Yeah, just like Fleming and Smith are. So it's like they had the number 1 receiver in the country, the son of a Hall of Famer, and they were like, you guys watch. More opportunity than usual. And then the second thing, is Jeremiah Smith the next evolution of Ohio State receiver? If Marvin Harrison Jr. has established the new standard of what great receiver play at Ohio State looks like, would you agree that he has?
Yes, I would agree with that.
Jeremiah Smith be better than Marvin Harrison Jr.? Are we doing that? We're doing that here in February 2024. Did I actually say that?
Do we want to do it before he ever plays a snap like that? I mean, it's the idea, right? He is, ask anybody, the best prospect they've had. And like, catch Brian Hartline in an honest moment. I think he'll tell you the same thing. Prospect coming out of high school, they have not had anybody as good as Jeremiah Smith. I don't. There's a lot of people who think there hasn't been anybody this good since who won Julio Jones. God, I can't believe I forgot Julio Jones' name. Like that's the kind of receiver prospect we're talking about here. So like if it sounds hyperbolic, that's why. So yeah, the expectations for Jeremiah Smith are to look at the standard that Marvin Harrison just set, which I agree with you is a resetting of the standard of receiver play at Ohio State, and then reset that.
Yep.
So no pressure.
So that's what we want to see this spring. That's why he's on the list. Because, like, what does it look like? Does it look like, like immediately it's here? Like he's ready? Or does it look like, okay, guess what? He's a teenager. He's never done this before. It's going to take a little time. He's probably, no matter how he looks this spring, he'll have some level of opportunity this fall just because of the way their receiver depth chart shakes down. But we'll get a sense this spring of like whether he's going to pop, like, could he be like an All-American as a freshman? Or whether it's going to be like, okay, Emeka Buka is going to be the guy. Carnell Tate in year 2 is really ready to go. And then Jeremiah Smith will be a nice complement to those guys, sort of as the number 3 receiver. Will it be more like that? Let's go back. Actually, is it back to the defensive side of the ball, or we have not done defense yet, right? No, we did receiver. We did offensive tackle. We did look at us. There's 2 sides of the ball, guys. A.J. Harris, Penn State cornerback, transfer. Why is he on your list, Bill?
Transfer from Georgia. For much of his recruitment was a 5-star prospect. I think he actually ended up being a composite 4-star prospect in the 2023 recruiting class. Top 50 guy, number 3 cornerback, was like heavy Ohio State, heavy Georgia, signed with Georgia, played a little bit last year. Ended up like, I think not playing at all, like sort of down the stretch, like in the month of November, just didn't play very much, which is not totally unexpected at a place that recruits as well as Georgia. But he decides to leave, and a team in Penn State that is losing its top 3 cornerbacks, Kalen King, Johnny Dixon, Daquan Hardy, all going to the NFL draft. I think all 3 going to get drafted, like all 3 very good players. Penn State needs help at corner. They're really young at that position. The majority of that room is freshmen and sophomores, now including A.J. Harris. There's 1 player in that room who's a junior. There are no seniors in that Penn State cornerback room. It is a hard reset at that position for Penn State, and it's a position that's been really good for Penn State. They got like a little bit of a thing going there where I think they've had a guy drafted at cornerback in 5 of the last 6 drafts. They had a first rounder last year in Joey Porter Jr. They're going to have 3 draft picks this coming draft, I think, out of that room. Like, they are starting to develop a bit of a reputation, but there's a little bit of a gap here, I think. And A.J. Harris kind of has to help bridge it. And not only bridge it, but I think, like, realize his potential as a guy who was a borderline 5-star prospect, and I think blossom into a star, if not blossom into Penn State's number 1 cornerback this coming fall. And, we're talking spring ball, so he doesn't have to necessarily be that day 1 of spring, but I think there's an expectation in State College that A.J. Harris will become that. He's a kid that they recruited out of high school a little bit. There was like a pre-existing relationship there with James Franklin and the defensive staff. So it's a guy who is coming to a new place, and I think going to immediately be expected to perform and act and look like a starting caliber player for a defense that is looking to just reload. Like, I think that's the position that Penn State's in defensively anymore, that they're not content with taking steps back. So they bring in a guy like A.J. Harris to make sure that they don't. And he's in a big spot, having to replace some pretty productive players.
Joey Porter Jr. was actually the first pick of the second round.
Second round, sorry.
But who cheated? Who cheated and didn't have a pick?
Because
he was the Dolphins.
The Dolphins lost their first round pick. Yeah.
What did they do to cheat? Did they try to steal Tom Brady from somebody?
They tried to steal Tom Brady. Yeah.
How dare you? So, but that legacy is this position is Penn, and I think we could maybe just throw secondary in there because they have to run some great safeties through there as well. Is if we did, I want to write that down. Best Northern position groups. If we did best Northern position groups, recent history, reputation, legacy, would Penn State corners / Penn State secondary appear on a top 10 list there?
I think if you combine corners and safety, yeah, for sure. Because they've had good corner play prior to Joey Porter Jr. Like Joey Porter Jr. sort of feels like a transition into something more. But they also had good safety. Like I remember, like Daquan Brisker, obviously recently was a really good player for them. they've had a couple, I think, of first team all Big Ten safeties the last few years, in addition to being really good at cornerback. So Jair Brown, yeah.
Yep.
I would definitely say that if we broke it down that way and combined both defense or safeties and corners, the Penn State defensive backs would be pretty hard to beat.
This is what the North has to do. You have to be ready. And there's a couple other guys maybe in that we might talk about, or we could talk about later in spring, that this is a perfect example of, like, it's a big time recruit. He goes to the South, it doesn't work out. And then is in the transfer world, when he's ready to go, like, it's almost like Georgia's too talented. Okay. Take advantage of the fact that Georgia has too much talent. When that guy's looking around, Penn State's ready. Like, this is how the North, it's part of, I think, the idea of why the North can rise up, because taking advantage of situations like this. So do we think Cam Miller is going to be one of the other corners for?
Yeah, he started the
Penn
Peach
State?
Bowl. Yeah, he was a starter in the Peach Bowl. He's the guy in the room who I mentioned who's a junior. He's like the only if you consider junior and above upperclassman, he's the only upperclassman in the room.
Okay.
Zion Tracy played 148 snaps last year. Elliott Washington played 82. He was another guy who was pretty highly recruited. And then the rest of the room it's AJ Harrison and three true freshmen. So there's not a lot there in terms of experience.
Cam Miller was the number 278 recruit in the class of 2022. AJ Harris is a top 50 recruit in the class of 2023. You got to have skill. You have guys with skill at the corner position. Again, this is a league that's going to throw. You've got to be able to throw and defend the pass in the playoff. Like this, just even Penn State's ability to, like, get in on and identify, get in the mix, and then lock down a guy like this out of the transfer portal. This is how it looks. This is how it works in the new era. And this is what the North must do to compete. So to see what AJ Harris is going to look like getting on the field at Penn State after he didn't get much of an opportunity last year, this is how the North rises back up. Quick break. When we come back, I want to talk about a side of the ball that I think people know what's up with this team on this side of the ball, but I have the numbers and it might blow your mind. We'll do that next on Kings of the North. Back on Kings of the North. Thanks for being here. Give us a thumb if you're watching on YouTube. Drop us a review on Apple Podcasts if you're listening on podcasts. We're just so grateful that you guys have decided to make Kings of the North part of your week. Again, we're looking at probably next week will be our first preview of maybe like the 13 teams in the North that are starting spring football first, and then probably the week after that we'll do the other 13 teams. But I do want to. I was diving into some stuff over the weekend. My local Panera is closing.
Oh, that's sad.
On a time, yeah. Someone said that maybe Panera is going to focus on outlets with drive-throughs. So my local one, which is like literally 2 miles from my house, doesn't have a drive-through.
I don't think Panera's drive-through food. Like, it can be, like, you can take it home with you, but like, it's not like eating your car food.
Not in the afternoon. It's not. Like, that's the thing. Like, you
big bowl of soup while you're driving.
Yeah. I mean, have I eaten soup while driving? Yes. Do I prefer to do it? No. The breakfast stuff, the breakfast souffles. Oh, chef's kiss. So I wanted to go on Friday evening. I wanted to go. It's closing like Thursday. So I wanted to go because there was a time when I would be at that Panera like 3 days a week, writing stuff. So I went, this was my Friday. I went and worked at Panera from like 5 o'clock till 9 o'clock. And then I went and saw Poor Things at 10 o'clock. Yeah. Emma Stone is Frankenstein. Have you seen that movie?
I haven't seen it. I want to see it. I know the gist.
Do you? It might be the weirdest movie I've ever seen. I think it is definitely the weirdest movie. I've not decided if I liked it or not. It is weird. It's nominated for like 9 Oscars. It's so weird. So here's what I decided sitting there. I was looking up snowfall amounts, average December temperature, because that would be if you would host a playoff game on your campus site, and latitude. I don't know what latitude is, right? I had to double check myself on latitude. Trying to define what is a northern team. What is a northern school? Who do we really want to claim here in Kings of the North? And I'm pretty sure that maybe as soon as we get through with spring football, I'm going to make a compelling case for us to expand to 28 from our current 26. Because I think definitively there are 2 that we should add. And then the other 3 that I was considering, I think there are reasons to not add them right now. So our little family is going to grow.
Right. Welcome Hawaii. Can't wait.
We're not sending. What? No, we might send you to Hawaii.
Okay.
Like the Utah and Oregon are going to recruit guys from there, so we probably have to send you there. BYU,
that's
right?
Yeah.
I want to talk about Iowa, and I want to talk about Brian Allen, and I want to talk about a guy who passes our test of getting talked about in bowl practice and getting talked about in the preseason. This guy was getting talked about in practice last preseason. He got talked about in bowl practice again. He is coming into his third season as a defensive end at Iowa. He is 6'4", 265 pounds. He absolutely looks the part. I think he has a chance to be a breakout star this year as a defensive end, as a 30 defensive end at Iowa, because the top 15 defensive players at Iowa in number of snaps played last year. One of the things I'm going to do in our spring football previews, I'm going to go through everybody's top 35 from last year. That's my new threshold. That usually covers for most teams is everybody who played 200 snaps or more the year before. Both sides of the ball, offense and defense. Usually there's about 35 guys. 15 guys on Iowa's defense played at least 200 snaps last year. Guess how many of those 15 are back?
3.
No. Are returning on Iowa's defense. Are returning.
Oh, returning?
Returning to Iowa of their top 15 guys.
Okay. 12.
It is 12.
Yeah.
They're all back.
Yeah.
They are losing Cooper DeJean, who's going to go in the first round as a corner, but they were playing without him at the end of last year when he got hurt. They're losing Joe Evans, the defensive end, and losing Logan Lee at defensive tackle. They have their top 6 guys by snaps last year are all back. Then it's those 3 guys, and then it's the rest of the guys through 15. Brian Allen's not one of them, but this is what I like. He's probably not even going to start because he's probably going to be their 3rd or 4th defensive end because they have Deontay Craig and Ethan Herkett are probably back as their starters, but he'll be like a rotational defensive end that they can just let it rip because everybody else is like, we got it. Jay Higgins, who's like a first team all Big Ten linebacker, is like, hey, do your thing. You go get the quarterback. I'll handle everything back here. Sebastian Castro is going to be one of the best corners. Xavier Wampa is going to be a star at safety. Like, it is ridiculous. They were the number 3 defense in the country last year by our efficiency rating that we like, the FEI, right? Ratings. Number 3, 12 of their top 15 are back. And I'm talking about a guy who's not one of their top 15 that seems like he's ready to be a star. This Iowa defense, here's what I'm grateful about. I'm grateful that the other thing is done so we can just talk about football when we talk about Iowa now. The Iowa football conversation is fascinating because their offense is going to be better and their defense might be ridiculous.
And your defense is going to be awesome. Do you know which Iowa defensive lineman led the team in pass rush win rate last year, according to PFF?
I don't.
It was Brian Allen.
Yeah, baby.
By like a pretty wide margin.
Stats.
His was 26.7%, and the next closest defensive lineman was 11.8%.
They got a bunch of do your job guys, and then they just got this guy who can just get the quarterback. Like I love all of this coming together because they have a really good secondary, right? So that's going to hold up. And they have like other guys in the defensive line who will just tie people up. And then you just go like get Brian Allen in a one-on-one matchup. Again, this is the kind of a lot of this stuff. I hope people understand this. We're going to be talking to more and more people in the North, but a lot of our information now is we read and listen to smart people who cover the local team. So without local beat writers, without people who are around the team on a regular basis and making it their job, it would make our jobs much harder. But I'm reading and I'm listening to what people who cover Iowa are saying. And it's that kind of conversation of like, man, I saw this guy in practice and oh, watch out. So sliding that guy into, and again, does it mean he's going to play 55 snaps a game? Probably not. He'll probably be part of like a 4-man defensive end rotation. But I think he has a chance to be the kind of guy who in 30 snaps a game really makes an impact. And I think we'll get a read on that to some degree this spring, I'm hoping. But I like that. Thanks for the stats, man. Thanks for backing me up. Would have my back
of course.
There, Brian Allen.
Yeah. So you think probably more situational for him? Like, is there a chance that it's just like, you know what? We thought it was going to be situational, and it turns out he's our best defensive end.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's like what good defensive programs do. It's like wait wait, like 2 years of watch, learn, there's good guys in front of you, and then when it's your turn, it's like, "Oh, whoops.
Yeah.
Is this guy gonna go to the NFL?" Because he's gonna have, like, 12 and a half sacks? Like, I just he's the kind of player that people have noticed since he got on campus. And so I just think there's a lot of this has a chance to be a really special Iowa defense. And I think people know it. Ohio State had a lot of guys come back and stay in school with a purpose, just like Michigan did last year. Iowa had the same thing. Iowa had a lot of guys stay with a purpose. Most of them on the defensive side of the ball. Luke Lachey at tight end is one of the offensive guys who stayed as well. But this Iowa defense, but a lot of these other guys, they're not going to show. What does Jay Higgins need to do in spring? Right? What does Sebastian Castro need to do in spring? Like maybe they won't even get that many reps. But Brian Allen, he's going to let it rip in spring, I think. All right. Number 7, we're going back to the offensive side of the ball with a receiver from you.
Yeah, so it's Dorian Singer at Utah, transfer from USC, like an interesting path to get to Utah. I think he's originally from Minnesota, ends up going to high school in
son of the North.
He's son of the North. That's right. Goes to high school in Arizona, Pinnacle High School in Arizona, signs with Arizona, and has a really good sophomore year there. Like is one of the best receivers in the country in 2022. Goes to USC, transfers to USC after that, and everyone's like, all right, here we go. Like, this kid's going to really break out in USC's offense, like, can rally Caleb Williams. Didn't happen. It was a weird offense. They had, it seemed like USC could, never really figure out who their best receivers were, and Dorian Singer got kind of, caught in the wash of that. So he's leaving USC, and he's going to Utah for a fresh start there. And which guy are you going to get? Are you going to get the guy that was a little lost last year at USC? Or you're going to get the guy that was one of the more explosive players in the country in Arizona 2 years ago? For Utah's sake, they're hoping it's the latter. And it's an offense that really needs more explosive playmakers, I think. If you look at some of the stuff Dorian Singer's done in his career, yards after catch, average depth of target, that kind of stuff, Utah stuff pales in comparison. It's just not the way that Utah has really played. But I don't know if that's because they choose to play that way or because they don't have the guys who are explosive enough to attack teams that way. And I think Dorian Singer might be a guy who unlocks something for Utah's offense, and Cam Rising coming off of his missed season and his injuries, has at the very least one of the more interesting receivers, I think, in all of college football, just because of the kind of winding road to get here. But also potentially a pretty explosive, dynamic playmaker in an offense that's not necessarily accustomed to having them at the receiver position.
2022, I was just double checking this if I zoned out looking at stats. There were, in the 2022 season, 31 receivers in major college football who had at least 1,000 receiving yards. There were 3 pairs of teammates that were 1,000-yard receivers in 2022. Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Buka at Ohio State, Rome Odunze and Jalen McMillan at Washington, Jacob Cowing and Dorian Singer at Arizona. Mm-hmm. And then Dorian Singer was like, that was great. I'm going to USC. And so now you think about this, right? That's the level this guy was at. That's what this guy has laid down in the past. That's his resume. Odunze is gone. McMillan's gone. Harrison Jr. is gone. Mekabuka's still around. But Dorian Singer is now in the North. So, again, this is exactly how, 1,000 yards Arizona. Hey, he's going to USC. Didn't exactly click at USC. Utah's like, we'll take it. A place that is it's tight end you, physical defense you, and you're going to add a playmaker in there. This is the team that we think is going to win the Big 12. But can you only win the Big 12? What you're best at? You got to add a little something to it. I love this pick. This is huge. What he could do for Utah.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, elevates their season ceiling. Tremendously. And he's a guy who's played I think it's 24% of his snaps in the slot. So he can play a little bit of both inside, outside. He's not the biggest guy in the world, but he's 6 feet. He's got good speed. And the thing that I think most interests me about this potential fit is just the after the catch stuff, which is just Utah has not had a ton of it. Dorian Singer, last year was a lot of his numbers were down, but 2 years ago he had almost 400 yards after the catch. And last year, the guy who led Utah in yards after the catch was Sione Vaki, who was a safety who had to play running back for a couple of games. So there's a potential serious upgrade here, I think, in terms of offensive playmaking for Utah if Dorian Singer is able to find the form that he had 2 years ago at Arizona.
Yeah, this is a team that often, typically, more often than not, a tight end leads them in receiving yards.
Mhm.
So like they don't if he has 1,000-yard season with the 7th-year quarterback as a receiver at Utah, like that, they won't know what hit him, man.
Yeah.
Love it. So that's a big time transfer. This is another from a warm weather climate, 2 warm weather climates to Utah. This is another warm weather transfer. This is a guy kind of coming home though, and this is Fadil Diggs, who is. Have you seen this before? I might just be late to the party on stuff. If you go to his bio at Syracuse, he is listed. His position is listed as big skill. He's a defensive end.
I have
Big skill.
seen like in winter workouts and stuff. I've definitely seen like skill, like designation skill and big skill. I've never seen it listed on a roster or an official player bio.
This is now, I feel like, creating a difficult choice for you for your rap name, which previously we were all pretty sure was Philly Billy, but big skill.
Big skill is pretty good.
That?
Yeah, I might have to adopt that. Are there other guys on the roster with big skill?
I don't know. I was so blown away by it. We'll have to research this. I'll get Fran Brown on and Elijah Robinson on tomorrow, which is why he's here. So Fadil Diggs, he's from Camden, New Jersey, which is where Fran Brown, the new Syracuse head coach, and Elijah Robinson, the new defensive coordinator, are from. Elijah Robinson was his defensive coordinator at Texas A&M, where Fadil Diggs played for the last 4 years, 2-time captain. His brother, Fatim Diggs, is going to be a freshman at Syracuse. So the Diggs family, all this jersey, it's part of the jersey story of Syracuse. But this guy is an excellent player. He had 11 tackles for loss last year at Texas A&M. That tied for 14th in the SEC, which is like where great defensive linemen come from. 6'5", 260. He's a 2-time captain at Texas A&M. And what fascinates me about this is like a Jersey guy who went to Texas A&M coming back with this New Jersey coaching staff. And this is the kind of guy that first-year coaches lean on so hard. Mm-hmm. 2-time captain in the SEC. He's going to be a captain at Syracuse. So yes, Kyle McCord as a transfer is a huge deal for Syracuse at quarterback from Ohio State. I think this is bigger. I think this is one of those, if Fran Brown is 5 years from now is having just a boatload of success as a head coach, I think he's going to tell stories about Fadil Diggs and what Fadil Diggs did to come in and be a leader, establish culture. This is a guy who establishes culture. You go back and watch like YouTube videos on Fadil Diggs when it's going sideways at Texas A&M last year and Jimbo Fisher's getting fired. This is the guy who's out after every game talking, like carrying that burden. So this guy is an absolute culture monster, and he's also a great player. And I think he is going to be, if this works at Syracuse, the Diggs family is going to be part of the story. He's 4 years older than his brother. They never played together in high school, but what they have a chance to lay down here, I think it's a great story for this guy to have a chance to like sort of come back close to home and really matter. So they have another really good transfer at defensive end, James Hurd Jr. from West Virginia. So like, again, Fran Brown's got a lot going on, but I just like that this guy's going to matter to the Syracuse program beyond what he does getting after the quarterback.
Yeah. So was it Elijah Robinson, Syracuse is now defensive coordinator, formerly the Texas A&M defensive line coach, is also from Camden.
Yes.
There's right. So that's how you get it.
Yep.
That's how you get a kid from Camden, New Jersey, in College Station, which otherwise I don't know how you would pull that off. But no, it is interesting. I think you're right. Like it's not the same as like if Fran Brown was bringing a guy from Georgia who had played with him and like can help tell guys what he's all about. But I think there's probably some understanding of what Fran Brown is about because he and Fadil Diggs grew up in the same area, which is like not a particularly big area. Like there's I'm sure they knew each other even prior to Fadil Diggs being at Syracuse. And he's also a player too, who's, I think he was third among defensive ends at Texas A&M, like just sheer number of pass rush opportunities. And now like I'm sure he'll be first or second at Syracuse. So like what can a guy like that do with more opportunity than probably he was going to get at Texas A&M, I think is really enticing. So you're getting like, you're on the field, off the field here, right? I think, and I think they're both really interesting because I do think there are things here that tell you that Fadil Diggs could be like a pretty impactful pass rusher for Syracuse, but it's probably more about helping Fran Brown set the tone there. But it's definitely an added bonus that you might be able to get some real on field production from him too.
All right, back to the offensive side of the ball for your last pick from Notre Dame.
It is Jeremiah Love, one of the rising running backs at Notre Dame, but I think the guy, in South Bend, people that cover the program, people that talk about the program every day, I think this is the guy that everyone is expecting to take the bulk of the carries that are now available with Audric Estime going off to the NFL. By the way, we talked about how good Audric Estime was last year. I don't know if the country talked enough about how good Audric Estime was last year. He got a little overshadowed, I think, by some other guys who got like more All-America type of recognition, but he was awesome last year for a Notre Dame team that like kind of fell out of the national conversation by the midway point of the season.
Don't you think he's just great in the NFL too?
I do. I think he's going to be awesome in the NFL. Yeah. They had 3 younger backs behind Audric Estime. Not a ton of workload, but Jeremiah Love was the guy who got the most out of those 3. It was Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Jabron Payne were like the 3 guys behind him, but there was a decent enough gap between Jeremiah Love's carries and the rest of the carries that I think it's reasonable to project that he is going to be the guy who at least gets the first opportunity to take a run at getting the bulk of those carries that are available. He got to start the Sun Bowl against Oklahoma State. Probably not the breakout game he was hoping for. Like a lot of the coverage going into that was like, here comes Jeremiah Love. He's ready for the spotlight. He wants to show people what this is going to look like. He was just a freshman last year, but it was still put in a big spot. And it was a fine game, but it wasn't like a coming out party that I think he was hoping for. But the raw skills are still like off the charts. Like he's like a track guy who ran a sub 1100, pretty good like jumper as well, and just like super explosive athlete, who I think Notre Dame could probably use a number of different ways. And that's like part of what makes this interesting with Mike Denbrock going there now as the offensive coordinator. Like, is Jeremiah Love just a running back? Could he play some kind of like slot receiver? Can you throw him the ball? I think there's some thought that he's perhaps like still a little bit more of just like an athlete and maybe not quite like a fully developed football player yet, which makes the spring really important, which makes this offseason really important for him. But I think there's a lot of potential here for a guy who should be getting, 60 or so % of the running back touches in an offense. And I still think is going to run the ball quite a bit.
Audric Estime 6.4 yards per carry last year.
Yeah.
And they kind of knew he was getting the ball. He's the mock draft database for the NFL draft has him as projected as a 4th rounder. Doesn't it feel like he's like going to go in the 4th round and then like run for 1,200 yards as a rookie?
Yeah, like lead the league in rushing. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think of this? Is like right the next. I mean, Estime was so good last year, but I think we focused on the young receivers a lot at Notre Dame last year. They'd had obviously run good tight ends through there. Do you feel like Notre Dame's like getting like elevating its collection of skill guys, like as they try to take this next step, as people talk about them as a potential playoff team this year, and that kind of thing? Are they the guys with the ball in their hand are getting that next level of skill, you think?
Yeah, I think they're getting there. I don't know if they're all the way there yet, and they've done some retooling like via the transfer portal. I think to help accelerate that process a little bit. But I think if you look at their classes from 3 or 4 years ago and look at what they have now at receiver and running back, I do think it's a different kind of athlete. Yeah. Okay, that was a good one because again, like this is big shoes. That was one of the things we want to talk about. It's like big shoes to fill, and fill in the Audric Estime shoes are certainly big. This last one is just a little bit of like a wild card. This is like there's a stat that I really want to focus on, and it's back to another edge rusher. I wound up with going with 3 edge rushers with my picks, and it's Anto Saka from Northwestern, who is entering his 3rd year. He was a top 300 national recruit in the class of 2022. He's from Maryland. He made official visits to Penn State, NUSC, and Northwestern got him. And let's go to the list of the leading returning sack guys in the North. I hope my math is right on this. I'm going through. It's like, who had the sacks? Who's still back? So the number 1 sack guy back is Kyron Jenkins from Purdue, who had 7.5 sacks last year, and Ja Joyner from Minnesota. They're both back, 7.5 sacks last season. Jack Sawyer at Ohio State,
6.5 sacks last year. Then we have Aiden Hubbard, Seth Coleman, and Dan Strigo from Minnesota, who all had 6 sacks last year. Okay. There's a point to this. Then Jamari Butler from Nebraska had 5.5 sacks, and Anto Saka had 5.5 sacks. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are only 6 guys in the North of our 26 teams, Bill, who are back and had more sacks than Anto Saka last year. I swear there's a point. Here is the total number of snaps. I just listed 7 guys, the 7 leading returning sack guys in the North. Here are the number of snaps they played last year. Okay. Kydron Jenkins, 720. Jaw Joyner, Minnesota, 422. Jack Sawyer, Ohio State, 610. Aiden Hubbard, Northwestern, 369. Seth Coleman, Illinois, 625. Dan Strigo, Minnesota, 505. Jamari Butler, Nebraska, 359. Anto Saka played 139 snaps last year. 139 snaps, and he had 5.5 sacks. He played 25 snaps total in the last 3 games of the season. 25 snaps total and had 3 sacks. He had a sack last year against Duke where he just smoked Graham Barton, the left tackle for Duke, who is projected to be a first-round pick in the NFL draft that's looming. Smoked him. Speed rush around the edge, sacked Riley Leonard. And he played 139 snaps. He is a pass rush specialist. So David Braun was talking about him early last season, says that young man has a different gear and he's able to get after the quarterback, right? So that's early on, he's sacking guys. He's got to do more. But he had 78 this is your pass rush win rate stuff, right? Are you looking it up for me? 78 pass rush snaps last year. He had 14 pressures on the 78 pass rush snaps. He is a pass rush maniac. He's a huge recruit. He's a rare guy. Northwestern doesn't get a ton of guys like this. And if he can elevate the rest of his game and they play him a little bit more, they've had some good defensive linemen come through Northwestern. I think this could be a guy that could be a problem this season.
They're really good at finding under the radar, just athletic dudes. And then 4 years later, you look up that guy led the Big Ten in sacks, and now he's a second-round pick. Yeah. Right.
So,
and this feels like the next guy. Yeah.
So just be ready.
Who was the guy a couple years ago? Added Tamawa out of Baware, right?
Destroyed Ohio State. It was who was this guy destroying Ohio State? It's he's one of the best 50 players in college football.
Yeah.
So it was good. We got to talk about they lost a lot of guys. Nick Skirton was the other Purdue guy who had a lot of sacks last year. He transferred to Texas A&M actually. A lot of other guys went to the NFL, right? So there's the North obviously lost some guys, but I just this is 100. He played 139 defensive snaps. But I put him on the list. Is it okay? I put him on the list. 139 snaps.
I think it's a great addition on the list. Yeah, his win rate is almost 16%, which is maybe doesn't sound like a super high number. And there are guys that are in the 20s, a couple anyway. But Jonah Ellis, who we really liked last year at Utah, he was 17%, and he was for most of the season leading the country in sacks. So that's kind of around where Anto Saka is on a much smaller sample size.
Okay, you ready for spring football?
I am ready for spring football. Yeah, I love spring football.
Yeah. February 29th, that's Thursday. That's BYU, Boston College on Friday. We have our list of spring games. There's a bunch.
Was there anything about Boston College maybe not trying to start spring ball 4 days after Bill O'Brien arrived? Did they consider pushing it back at all?
Well, they didn't. That date just popped up recently. They were kind of a unknown on some when are they going to start? And then all of a sudden it's oh, they're starting Friday. So
I guess you get locked into your spring game date, right? And then you just have to figure out a time before then to get 15 practices in or 14 practices in.
They are at the early end, April 13th, Ohio State, Penn State, Boston College, Cincinnati, Purdue. Then the next weekend, Notre Dame, Iowa, Syracuse, Illinois, Iowa State, Michigan. They're all on April 20. Then that next weekend in April, this is for the spring game again, Colorado, Nebraska, West Virginia, Oregon, Rutgers, and then Washington's the next weekend on May 4th. So they are super late. There's a couple.
Wow.
May, yeah. So there's a couple that maybe haven't been officially announced yet. But again, so that's, we'll make sure we preview it, and then we're going to wrap it up. And we're going to have people who are there covering the teams come on the show and help us wrap up spring football and what was really learned. And again, that's like spring football is really valuable because I can feel like sometimes going into spring football, you feel like you don't know much. You can really get a handle on things.
Yeah.
I really felt like coming out of spring football last year and the show I was doing last year at this time, the two teams I was really in on coming out of spring football were Florida State and Washington, based on like what they did, the guys they had. I think a lot of people were at that place with Michigan, right? And so like I'm really curious to see what northern teams can pop up that way. And I think Iowa could be one of them. I think we might get out of spring talking about Iowa as like a real playoff team with improved offensive coaching, a veteran quarterback in Cade McNamara, Caden Proctor as a 5-star left tackle, a great tight end in Luke Lachey. They always run the ball pretty well, and like a devastating defense. I think I'm waiting for Iowa to be that kind of team. Oregon has so many like guys who are going to be dangerous with the ball in their hands, even though they're losing Bucky Irving and Troy Franklin. Like they're reloading there. Super curious to see what Oregon looks like with Dylan Gabriel at quarterback, what this Penn State defense looks like, right? And what the Penn State offense looks like with a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, Julian Fleming added. We didn't talk about him, like a receiver transferring from Ohio State to Penn State, maybe the number one receiver there, helping out Drew Aller. Like, will they open up that passing attack and the two good running backs they have? Like, there are some teams that I think we might think they're going to be good, and I think there's a chance that we're going to come out of spring being like, oh yeah, like we think they're going to be awesome. Like they confirmed a bunch of stuff for us.
Yeah, I think everyone you mentioned, like I'm super excited to see what Cam Rising's able to do this spring at Utah. I think Wisconsin's really interesting. Wisconsin's interesting too because like their spring practice is wide open, so like we're gonna know. If they stink, we're gonna know, and if they're really good, we're gonna know because there's eyeballs on it every day. So we'll get a good vibe, I think, for what's going on there with like Tyler Van Dyke taking over at quarterback. There's a lot, man. But even like the teams that we're higher on, like West Virginia, Iowa State, like you want to hear confirmation, I think, of what you believe in too during spring ball. So there, I mean, I don't know. Every team in our group, I think, has something compelling about them going into spring practice.
Thursday is Leap Day, and we are going to do a special Leap Day show. And what we are going to do is leap ahead and make predictions about Northern college football and college football to some degree, what it will be like on the next Leap Day in 2028. And to facilitate that, we are going to look back at the things that you could have predicted and maybe sounded crazy and been right if you would have done this in 2020 and said, what are we going to be like in 2024? If you would have predicted Nick Saban will be retired by the time we get to the next Leap Day. Georgia will have multiple national titles by the time we get to the next Leap Day. Michigan will have a national title and Jim Harbaugh will be off to the NFL as a conquering hero by the next Leap Day. You think about like how much has changed. Ed Orgeron coming off a national title. Yeah. Last time we had a Leap Day, he was a defending national champion. He's going to be fired by the next Leap Day, right? There's things like that. We're going to review that, and then we're going to predict 10 things that will be in place in college football by the time. But it's not going to be all, there'll be 27 teams in the top tier, and the money will, it's going to be football stuff, right? Can we do mostly football stuff?
It's definitely going to be football stuff, yeah.
Not TV contracts. Oh, I think the TV contract's going to be upwards. Nobody. So anyway, we'll look forward to you guys joining us on Thursday for that show. For now, thanks to our great producer, Mike Urostowski, for making us look good and sound good. He is Bill Landis. I am Doug Lesmerises. And that was Kings of the North.